coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
Brexit was not a policy of the Labour Party or the Tory Party. It was fought very hard for you as one of 29 Spartans through 3 meaningful votes by Theresa May, and I went grey covering them. Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip, news and the stories from our studios of GB News in the heart of Westminster. We're back from the never-ending, for me certainly, party conference season. I went to, I think it was 4 of them, or 4 of them. And as the MPs dragged their way back to the House of Commons with their conference flu, we are getting back to business as usual. Already the government has published plans to allow families of the Troubles in Northern Ireland to try and draw a line under the past. But is this provoking even more controversy? More about later when I'll be speaking to the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, on what he makes of Legacy Bill and the Northern Ireland Troubles, and also asking him about Brexit, because increasingly I think this autumn Brexit will be blamed by this government for the ills we are going through. But back to what business as usual means. PMQs, you know what that is, don't you? Departments taking questions from MPs, ministerial statements, legislation, committees, writing reports, taking evidence. This is the very stuff of Parliament. And the person watching a lot of that is an old friend of mine, Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. He's been the Tory MP for North Cotswolds since election, and the Tory MP, of course, since 1992. You've done your first year, haven't you, Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, as Chair of the Public Accounts Committee. Welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be on your political podcast. And we will no doubt, because the Public Accounts Committee scrutinises every single bit of public expenditure on behalf of the taxpayer, on behalf of Parliament. So we have a huge brief. And
it's not a Tory issue, is it really? It's on behalf of us all. That's what's often missed.
This is the least political committee in the House of Commons, because we are backed up by the National Audit Office, who produce these factual value for money reports.
They're like accountancy, big accountants who work for the government.
Yeah,
work for the taxpayer.
They're factual reports, and they are agreed between the NAO and the department. So there is no wriggle room. They are fact. And we examined those, and we asked the senior civil servants, permanent secretaries downwards, why they're not performing or why they are.
Let me explain it for a layman. The NAO, National Audit Office, has a programme of work which is agreed by the Public Accounts Committee. It then goes and does the work and produces like an accountant's report, quite a dry document, but there's lots of information in there. And then you interrogate the primary office holder,
the permanent secretary, the most senior person in each
the accounting officer for that department.
Yep, exactly.
In public, and that also has a second bite at trying to get some concern about, or not concern about, what you found there. What you said there, though, concerns me, because you said there that the report drawn up by the accountants is agreed by the department. Now, that's just me watering down.
So basically, we've only got half the story at the moment. So the National Audit Office has a big team of auditors. They audit every single government account. And when they do that, they find out where there are problems, where the money is being misspent or not spent, or whatever the case may be. They then decide, they do discuss it with my committee as to what they should examine. Yes. They produce these value for money reports. We then take those and examine the most senior civil servants. Then we produce a report with recommendations. The government constitutionally, no other committee operates in this way, the government constitutionally has to say within 6 weeks whether they accept our recommendation or not. And this government has accepted over 90% of our recommendations. So we do make a difference.
But you agree the findings with the department you're auditing? Well,
no, the NAO does.
I find that uncomfortable, because I wonder why that is. Why are you happy with that?
Because we have an agreed set of facts. How much have you spent on legal aid or legal bills for
that is a number.
Clinical negligence? It's a number, a huge number, £700 million.
Yes.
That's an agreed figure. The department, Ministry of Justice, which we're going to examine next week, can't come back and say, no, it's much less than that, because they've signed off the report. And that's how it works.
And that's why the word agreement works.
Yes.
It's not really massaging the reason. It's
no.
You agree on what
and very definitely, we do not agree with the civil servants. We want to find out what's going wrong. That's our role in life. And then just make recommendations. We're there to help the government in a way. The government wouldn't always see it this way. But we are there to make recommendations for the government to do something that it's not doing, or it is doing, but it's not doing properly.
Although your committee isn't political, and it's always chaired, isn't it, by an MP from the other party.
Constitutionally, it has
Constitutionally from the governing party. Is there any difference between Labour spending on a Labour government and a Tory government? I mean, because you, of course, were deputy chair, weren't you, when Meg Hillier was a Labour chair under the last Tory government. Have you noticed anything different?
Oh, yes. I mean, the borrowing has gone up, the deficit's gone up, unemployment has...
We know all that. Those are top-line numbers.
Yes.
But what you're looking at on the nuts and bolts of the work of government, is that different?
Well, I think it is different because what we've got now is a government that's making all sorts of pledges. Look at the reforms in the NHS, abolition of NHSE. We don't know what's going to follow it.
NHS England. That's
SEN. We don't know what's going to happen with this white paper. Defence, we certainly don't know how the government's going to find this additional $9 billion that they're going to need to get to 2.5%.
But the granular impact on civil servants that you're looking at means uncertainty for them. Is that right? Is that what you're implying there by saying?
I
lack of certainty.
I know. I think what the government needs to do is to have greater certainty in making a policy, making an announcement, is how they're going to implement it. It's all about implementation. It's no good it's a bit like Nigel Farage. Yes. It's no good coming up with a policy if you don't know how you're going to implement it.
Which area is the most murky? Now, I think of that because I remember vividly writing a story for Telegraph many years ago about the skips, I think at one of the nuclear plants where back in the 60s, they just dropped in nuclear waste and no one quite knows what's in there. And it's concerning. That was concerning a few years ago. And I always think of the murky skip as...
It's still there.
The murky skip.
It's still there. We've been Sellafield. It's still there. It's called the Swarf Storage Silo.
Yes.
And it's the most contaminated building in the country.
I find it terrifying thinking about the skip.
And it's still there. And again, it's another area where government is not making progress because to deal with all of that, they need to have what's called a deep geological disposal facility.
Which is very into rocks, deep.
Very deep. And they've gone backwards on that. There's no progress at all.
Well, I first wrote that 15 years ago. Having found it on paragraph 43 of an NAA report.
Well, there you are.
It's still the problem.
It's still there. And we've been looking at that. And there are three really big liabilities, really largely uncosted liabilities. The biggest one is pensions. Runs into trillions. The second biggest is nuclear decommissioning. And the third biggest is clinical negligence in the health service. Those are three things. We'll all be looking at all of them to try and prod the government into... They are so big, like pensions, but they need to start somewhere to start making an impact.
But his pensions, is that reduce the element of what you qualify as a civil service pensioner? Is that what you mean by that?
What I think in the private sector, you would move from defined benefit to defined contribution. Yes. The civil service is still on the defined...
like gold-plated.
Yes, and interestingly, when Wes Streeting started to talk about the doctors' pay dispute, he did float the idea that we might do these pension reforms in return for increasing the salaries now. And then actually, if you think about it, a lot of youngsters... would rather have a higher salary now. I mean, their pension is a long way off. So I think there is some merit. We've got to consider this. Otherwise, it'll completely bankrupt us by the next generation.
Generation, not general election, generation.
Just generation. Now, I hope I did say generation.
Generation.
Yeah.
And then other things, there are other areas too, decommissioning and then the other...
So decommissioning would be hugely helped in the planning if we could get this deep geological disposal, because then we know how quickly we can get that stuff out of that storage silo into this deep geological.
Yes.
And it's not only the civil nuclear stuff, it's the military nuclear stuff as well that needs to go there.
Gosh. Big stuff.
Big stuff.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code and account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just live in credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponise against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Now, do we get value for money from you? You work very hard. You get a small extra salary for this job, don't you? You
Well,
work
I would
very
say,
hard for it.
I would say, Chris, that I'm 72. I'm working harder than I've ever worked in my life. 2 of these public hearings a week. I tell you, I never stop. I never sleep. I'm always working on public accounts. So yes, you get superb value for money from me.
And your first annual report has identified 5 areas: digital transformation, AI, of course, like everything else is AI, backlogs, always backlogs, issues with the NHS, local government, and major government projects, and resilience against risk. And of course, it's big in the period when we're seeing hacking of our big organisations, don't we? Because you've drawn up a kind of...
Well, that is a little summary. Actually, the report covers a lot wider field than that, because you can imagine we've produced about 45 reports, or over 50 reports, about 45 in the public domain at the moment, and they cover a huge range.
Yes, those are the themes you pulled out of them. I mean, what have you picked out of from this? We hear often from people who've been in governments, they think the civil service is a Rolls Royce and it's really a Skoda. I mean, do you think it's not? Is it up to scratch? Our civil service, I mean, taking a helicopter view of it.
Like all organisations, there's some very good people in there, really good people. And there's some who, I think the real problem with the civil service, if I had to put my finger on it, it's very risk averse. So when you come to things like, for example, Innovate UK, where we're trying to pick out those companies that are going to actually produce new ideas and scale them up, and they're going to be the really important companies for the future. The civil servants in there tend to be risk averse, whereas actually they need to be thinking out of the box and thinking, right, which of those companies really has a chance of succeeding in the future?
Why are they worried about how you'll react, though? Is it about Geoffrey Clifton-Brown?
This is a really interesting point. And I have heard it said that they are worried about coming before the Public Accounts Committee. I've tried to make it as clear as I possibly can. We are in favour of innovation. If you have innovation, you've got to be prepared to let some people fail.
And explain why.
And learn the lessons so they don't do it again. And I think this is a really, really important point. I'm glad you raised it.
Is the civil service got the priorities right? We read a lot about DEI. All this, which some would say is a bit, given they've got limited amount of resources, let's focus on what matters rather than DEI or other areas.
Well, I think the problem with DEI is it tends to become more important than other things. For example, I'm on a statutory responsible for recruiting a very important public role at the moment. And the DEI discussion has been there all the time. I think really, of course, we have to pay attention to it. It's one of those things we need to pay attention. But actually the merit of him or her who gets the job is the really important thing.
But then you might see white men of our age being promoted all the time. So that's what the case is.
But I don't think that. I get that. But I actually do think we're now finding, for example, more and more women at our leading roles in our public sector. And I actually think we're getting more and more ethnic minorities too. So I think it happens anyway. We don't need to be talking about it all the time.
We do, don't we, a lot? Is DEI dominating the civil service to the extent that you're concerned?
In some places it is. It's not something that surfaces in our committee too much because we're dealing with these facts and we're trying to deal with other things. But it's there for sure.
And how should it be dealt with?
Well, I think
it's diversity, equality.
Yes, and I've just said it's something that we need to pay attention to. Otherwise, we could get into serious trouble as a country. But I think it gets overemphasised and over-talked about.
Yes. I would ask you also about your role on the 1922 committee. You're the honorary treasurer. You were there, as you said earlier, for her speech last week. We spoke before the podcast. You were pleased with it. The polls show her personal stock rising, the party stock not rising, but you'd expect that.
So what she did last week was that she did what I've been urging her to do ever since she became leader, which is set out what the Conservative Party stands for. If I knock on a door and somebody says to me, Mr. Brown, what does the Conservative Party stand for? We failed, because if they don't know what we stand for, they've got no chance of liking our policies and voting for us. But she started that process. I think she's put a lot of people's mind at ease. Good Conservative supporters, my constituents, I had a dinner afterwards, are much happier than they were. So I think she's done a good job in that. What she needs to do is keep on doing that. She was fluent. She demonstrated a sense of humour and she came up with an odd policy. I'm not too worried about the policies in this stage because we probably
stamp duty to be the big one.
We'd stamp duty the big one and a good policy too. But we're 3 or 4 years off an election, so a lot is going to change.
She's been saying a lot to us on her colleagues on this podcast and others that she's a marathon, not a sprint. She wants to be given time, and it looks like the time is. I think she has lost ground to Reform and Labour in the past year. No question, she's gone backwards in the polls. But maybe that was maybe last year was a turning point.
Look, Chris, I've on the last year in the Public Accounts Committee, a lot of what I've done is actually exposed what the Conservatives got wrong in the last government. We've got to get that all out there. We've got to admit our mistakes, but say that now she's a new leader, we are moving on, and we're going to try and produce a programme for the benefit of the people of this country, and that's what she's engaged in.
What do you make of Boris Johnson defending his Boris Wave this week? The Boris Wave is the numbers arriving here legally on his watch, hundreds of thousands coming here.
Well, I'm afraid to say, much as I like Boris, he's been widely discredited, hasn't he? I mean, even the Labour Party are now saying things about immigration that they would never have said 5 years ago because they are reacting to public opinion. I get it a lot in my constituents. And, the North Cotswolds is not exactly where you'd get a lot of immigrants, but they're worried about too many people coming into this housing, taking their school places, taking their
children too. They're worried
GP places, housing ladder. They just feel that there's too many people coming in. It's not that they don't want them to come in, but it's just too many of them.
So we tread carefully, but is Boris helping, or should he just pipe down a bit and just not try and defend what happened there?
Personally, I would always say that previous prime ministers should always be seen and not heard.
Yeah. I should say for listeners on the podcast, he's smiling when he says he's defending a record, isn't he?
Yes.
It doesn't help because I think that ship has sailed. I mean, really, too many on benefits and too many are basing the economic growth on those arriving here and not dealing with the number of benefits.
I mean, even he should be sensitive. And I know he's got a skin like a rhinoceros. Even he should be sensitive as to where the political mood in this country is.
Perhaps a period of silence from Boris Johnson
would do a lot of good.
Okay. But back to Kemi Badenoch as leader. There's a deadline approaching. You know what that is. 1st of November, I think it is, from memory. The date after which letters of no confidence can be submitted in her leadership because that's the 1 year anniversary of her as your leader. What's your advice to colleagues who maybe be thinking of putting a letter in?
Well, part of my
may have all changed since last week.
Well, it will have, for sure. But part of my job as Treasurer of the 22 is to talk to lots of colleagues. And I don't get the sense that there is many, if any, out there that are so dissatisfied, and particularly after last week, that they're going to put letters in. I think that if we had another change of leader at this moment, we would look utterly ridiculous.
Yes.
So I think she's
right.
got to be allowed a little more time to do what she's doing really well at the conference and just see what happens.
Deadline is May. I mean, May is the date I'm looking at for testing. Really, both Keir Starmer, frankly, and Kemi Badenoch, and if they've got it, I think. You accept that?
I think next May is going to be an important event in the local government election.
Which is fine, yeah. So obviously there's around 10,000 seats in England, but also the other...
Critically, the mayors.
The mayors, also critically Wales and Scotland.
Yes, all of that. And so we will wait and see what happens there. We start again from quite a high rank. So we wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of a drop. But I think we've got to just stick with her and allow her to do her job and get established and start to come up in the polls. And I'm not sure. The government's clearly getting itself into an awful trouble. I'm not sure that. We've now seen Farage actually rowing back on a number of his economic policies. For example, the tax exemption to rise from 12.5 to 20,000. He gaily puts that out there on a whim. He thinks it's a good thing when he wakes up in the morning. Yeah. It's going to cost between 50 and 80 billion.
Well, no, I've got to say, he says that was a general election pledge. He made that in May.
Yeah.
I was there when he made it in May.
Yeah.
It's not an election pledge. It's May this year.
Yeah.
I think he's slightly got away with one there. That is not a manifesto issue. It was made in May. And I think he is recognising he can't have aspirations. He must have policies.
But he's got to learn that if he's going to put a policy out there. And I was asked by an interview at the conference, well, what's the difference between Keir BLATANT abolishing the ECHR and Nigel Farage? I said the critical difference is that we have done the work. We know exactly how we're going to implement that policy. Nigel's just put it out there on a whim.
Well, no one resigned. I think the point there is no one resigned.
Exactly.
When he pulled out that large 180-page form of a legal document, but by that eminent
very carefully thought through and researched.
Unity in the party.
Yes,
you wouldn't have had a year ago. I would argue if a different candidate won, say, when leave the ECHR immediately, there would have been resignation.
That's partly why I think Kemi now started to make an impact. And I was on a radio program the other day, and they said, "Well, we never hear from Keir BLATANT." I said, "Well, look, we're on this radio. We've got a Labour person here. We've got a Liberal person on it, and you're discussing her. So clearly, she's breaking through."
So she's got maybe 8 months left.
Well, we'll see. Even if there were bad results next May, if she's done a good job putting across what Conservatives stand for, I think we've just got to move on.
Wait and see. Well, so Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast. Thank you.
Not at all. Delighted.
Now, my next guest is a Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, and also chair of the European Research Group of Conservative MPs, essentially the Brexit wing of the Tory party. Mark Francois, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. You've arrived here with a whole pile of folders and files and some draft legislation.
Yeah, I've literally come hot foot from the Commons, Chopper, and what has just happened was bordering on farce. We have spent very nearly an hour and a half responding to a statement by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland,
right?
Hilary Benn, Freudian slip there.
Hilary Benn.
About legacy.
It's called the Draft Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy Reconciliation Act 2024.
Remedial order.
Remedial order, right.
And then, right. So basically, the reason I say it's a farce was we've spent nearly an hour and a half debating the bill and the remedial order.
Yeah.
Which deliberately was not given to us until after the debate had finished.
So let's step back here. What this is doing is meant to give some degree of closure to families affected by the Troubles. By that, they mean families of veterans or veterans themselves injured or killed in the Troubles, but also they mean people killed on the other side of the fence who might be linked to the two terror groups.
Well, the Northern Ireland Legacy Act that the Conservatives brought in 2023 was designed to try and help draw a line under the very difficult history of the Troubles.
On both sides.
Correct. Troubles incidents could, under that legislation, still be investigated by a legacy commission, but only in very tightly defined circumstances. What Labour's bill does is it throws the door wide open to that whole conveyor belt of inquests and private investigations against our veterans, very often at the hands of Sinn Féin. And it is deeply cynical, and Labour know exactly what they are doing.
Why are they doing that? They are patriotic. They want to support veterans. They would surely contest what you're saying and say they want to try and get a better piece of legislation.
I'll tell you why they're doing it, because they are a government of human rights lawyers. They are obsessed, I use the word deliberately, with the Human Rights Act 1998. That's why we've got the farce over the Chagos Islands, for instance.
And ECH.
That's why they can't stop the boats. Oh, yeah, and that whole debate over the ECHR. So specifically on this, some courts in Northern Ireland ruled that our Legacy Act was incompatible with the human rights.
The previous one, passed by the Tory government.
Correct. We then appealed against that to the UK Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. We then had the election. Labour very rapidly dropped the appeal because it suited their view of human rights. So we believe there was a very good chance of winning that appeal in the Supreme Court.
But it was never contested.
They gave up.
So essentially, where we are now, the old bit of legislation was chucked out by the HRA. A new bit of legislation has come in, and you're saying it's freighted against veterans.
Absolutely. And what it will do, and they know this full well, and they've done a deal with the Irish government in order to facilitate this as well, is it will begin again that whole conveyor belt of inquests that was stopped by the Legacy Act.
Yeah.
And the first one they want to come up is the one at Loch Gall, and Ben admitted this in the Commons this afternoon. It would be one of the first, which is where the SAS successfully ambushed 8 IRA terrorists who had a digger full of explosives that they were about to use to blow up and murder the inhabitants of an RUC police station. And Sinn Féin have been desperate to get an inquest on this and to try and somehow get those SAS men prosecuted, and Labour have played right into their hands.
Is it an inquest or a private prosecution?
Ben effectively admitted that he'd already promised families of some of the IRA men that had been shot whilst attempting to murder policemen. He'd already promised them an inquest. He effectively admitted that in the
Is the problem here that the government views quite neutrally both the veterans and the families or those or terrorists killed as the same? Is that what's happening here?
Well, this is two.
There's no moral equivalence. They are the same. They're all victims of troubles now, whichever side you're on. Is that where we're?
Well, to me, there is no moral equivalence between alleged terrorists and veterans. But this is weighted against the veterans. Look, there were 300,000 British regular troops who served in Northern Ireland during the period we called the Troubles, and what the military called Operation Manor. Over 700 of those soldiers were murdered. Thousands of them had life-changing injuries at the hands of either Republican or Loyalist bombs. The army were getting it from both sides, and the IRA on one and from the UVF and others on the other. They were piggy in the middle, desperately trying to uphold the rule of law. It is literally true that if it hadn't have been for the British Army effectively fighting the IRA to a draw, some would say beating them, we would never have had the Good Friday Agreement in the first place, Chopper. But the government seemed to give that no recognition, and they know full well what they're doing in passing this legislation. And something else did come out this afternoon, which is that these so-called additional protections for veterans, being able to have anonymity...
Well, exactly, I was going to raise that.
Well, he effectively admitted that will all apply to alleged terrorists as well.
Well, that's what I mean. So it appears to be that it's just victims of troubles rather than which side were you on, I think, for the UK government, which is well interesting and clearly a lot.
I wouldn't regard an alleged terrorist or a dead terrorist as a victim of the troubles. They were the people that didn't have to.
Would.
They seem to have some kind of moral equivalence between the veterans on one side and some of the alleged terrorists on the others. Now, they wouldn't like me saying that, but the legislation that they have drafted has that effect.
And just finally on this issue, when will the first prosecutions take place? These against, in the veterans side, these are men, women in their 60s, 70s now? that right? That's the kind of people we're talking about.
Well, under a related document called the Remedial Order, that could start up some of these inquests, like Loch Gall, within months.
And that's not prosecution at the inquest. That's how they done.
But the conveyor belt is we had this with another recent inquest about the Clono incident, where again the IRA were stopped by the SAS. The IRA at Clono had welded a heavy anti-aircraft machine gun onto the back of a lorry. They used it to fire over 60 heavy rounds into an IUC police station. They then returned to a car park where the SAS were waiting for them. It was dark. They illuminated the soldiers in their headlights, and the soldiers, perfectly legitimately, fearing their lives were in danger, opened fire. It went to an inquest. The coroner effectively recommended they should be prosecuted.
So that you go to an inquest first, and then it follows the prosecution. So that's the order.
There is what we call a conveyor belt, right? That often these inquests
lead to prosecution.
Lead subsequently to prosecution.
And those could start happening before Christmas, do you think? Or?
The inquest could start pretty soon, and then prosecutions could follow. But you have to see this in a wider context, Chopper, if I may. Sinn Féin want to rewrite history. And that's partly why they push this so hard. They want to change the whole narrative. They don't want the truthful position that there was the army as piggy in the middle trying to uphold the rule of law. They want to try and persuade everybody, even though this was years ago, that the army were acting illegally and that the terrorists were somehow victims. And I'm afraid to say that this government of human rights lawyers are aiding and abetting that.
Well, we'll wait and see. And of course, we're covering the government side too, as we have been on this podcast throughout the next few months as this happens. I'm going to ask you quickly, if I can, moving on to a different issue, Brexit. You are chairman of the European Research Group of Tory MPs. Is Labour right to blame Brexit for its current woes, economically or whatever?
Absolute rubbish. They're saying that our economic output went down after Brexit. Well, there's a small matter of a global pandemic, Chopper. Everybody's economic output went down, certainly in the West. So to try and somehow blame all that on Brexit is ridiculous. And moreover, the Prime Minister himself has boasted about his independent trade deals with America, with India and with others. He could never have achieved those while we were in the EU, because we would have been in the customs union. And as you will know, when you're in a customs union, you can't negotiate independent trade agreements with anyone. You can only do it collectively via the EU. So
he's taking benefits from it, from Brexit in some parts, like trade deals, and then seeing it Wes Streeting. Not Keir Starmer. Wes Streeting is saying he's glad to say we can now say Brexit is a problem.
Look, I like Wes. I know him personally. I admire his struggle with trying to, get on top of the bureaucracy and the NHS. Yeah. But on this particular subject, he's talking absolute tosh.
We're going to see apparently the Chancellor blaming Brexit, or maybe Nigel Farage's Brexit, because they blame Nigel Farage for campaigning for Brexit, then disappearing from the scene. That's what Keir Starmer told the Labour conference 2 weeks ago. We'll be seeing more of that going into the budget.
It seems to me, as we get nearer and nearer to the 26th of November, as Judgment Day nears, the Labour Party are getting more and more desperate. They know there are going to have to be massive tax rises. They know they are going to be very, very unpopular, not least because they absolutely promised that they wouldn't do it. I mean, this could really be the straw that completely breaks the camel's back in terms of their relationship with the British electorate. So they are flailing around trying to find any excuse they can for, while growth is slowing and unemployment is going up and inflation is twice as high as it should be. And the simple truth is, it's all the whacking tax rises that they brought in last year.
They would say it might be friction at the border. It can be not being part of the European Union or some of the funding programs. These also have a bearing on the economy.
Look. Rachel Reeves went into the election, I remember the speech, promising no major tax rises if Labour came to power. She then has a budget, and she whacks taxes up. But by 40 billion quid. That's nothing to do with friction at the border, Chopper, is it?
Right, and we know what the Tory lines are. Just very finally, Brexit was not a policy of the Labour Party or the Tory Party. It was fought very hard for you as one of 29 Spartans through 3 meaningful votes by Theresa May, and I went grey covering them for the Daily Telegraph. Was Brexit just too hard for our political class to deliver? Have they both come up short in delivering what people voted for back in 2016?
I think one of the great things about Brexit was, in the end, the people won. The political class, most of them, via Project Fear, trying to browbeat the British people.
And they said no.
And the British people, well, in one famous song by Dominic Frisby, they said no in a special way. But at the end of the day, the British people refused to be bullied, and they had the temerity to vote to govern themselves. And thank God they did.
And so far, they've been let down by people who can't take advantage of it. Or would you say it's going to be too difficult? It's easy to be part of a big trading.
Labour's heart's never been in it, right? I saw for 3 years, you alluded to it earlier, Starmer in the Commons, combining with anyone he could to keep us in. That man wants to take us back in. Keir Starmer remains a Remainer. Well, he might do, but he's acting like he does.
Okay. Mark, Francois, we've gone down the beginning of a rabbit hole we can't possibly go down in the...
It's not a rabbit hole, it's called freedom.
Time left on this podcast. It's great to see you again on Chopper's Political Podcast.
It's a privilege to be back on.
Many times, and may you keep coming on. Thank you earlier to my previous guest, Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. I tweeted Christopher Hope on X. Are you on Twitter, Mark Francois?
Never have been, Chopper.
Are you surviving without it?
Funny, well, I somehow managed to get re-elected without it.
With a massive majority, despite the
a reasonable majority.
Yeah. And email me if you want, shopper@gbnews.uk. Why not tell me, is Brexit any good? Or perhaps don't. But anyway, have a go. If you really enjoyed this show, please do tell your friends. And of course, leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That helps other people to find it, and tune in and watch it, of course, on GB News' YouTube channel. Thanks to the great team of colleagues behind the podcast, Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh back at base, and the podcast busy worker bees, the Queen Bee herself, Rebecca Nunes, and the worker bee, of course, George Macmillan. But most importantly, again, thank you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and Mark Francois does, capture during the week on GB News with my latest political scoops and updates, and on my other colleagues, of course, Catherine Forster, Liv Utley and Tom Harwood. But do get our best political reporting on our website, gbnews.com. But as the adverts are over, until next time, cheerio.
So it's good night from me, and it's good night from him.
Good night.